Good evening and welcome to this webinar session on corporate governance. I am CMA Dr. S.K. Gupta. I am a postgraduate in commerce, a cost accountant, a company secretary with a PhD in corporate governance. I have spent over 40 years in industry so far in the domains of finance, costing, internal audit, legal, and company secretarial domains in both public and private sector organizations. I have addressed over 400 national and international seminars and conferences. I have published over 150 articles and research papers in various professional journals. I'm currently guiding 5 PhD scholars who are pursuing their research work. Good evening. It is my pleasure to be talking to you today in this webinar session on some of the perspectives and aspects of corporate governance. The way the corporate enterprises are structured automatically brings into fore the agency problem. That is, in companies across the world, that's the nature and peculiarity of a limited company. There is a separation of ownership and control. Ownership of the company lies with the providers of finance or the shareholders. And since these shareholders are widely spread across different geographies, they cannot by themselves manage the day-to-day affairs of the company. And for that purpose, they engage professional managers who are virtually agents of the owners of the company. Now, in such a situation, there arises, in some cases, a dichotomy or dilemma as to what is required to be focused upon. Whether the professional managers should focus upon their individual, personal, micro level organizational agenda, or they should actually be looking at the macro perspective, trying to maximize the value for all the stakeholders of the company. And the basic governing structure of the company, the structure of corporate governance, which is operating in a corporate enterprise, shapes the destiny of the company as to whether the company will survive long term, whether the company will progressively sustain in the market in a profitable manner or not, is determined by the level and quality of corporate governance practices prevailing within the company. In recent years, we have come across corporate scandals like what happened in WorldCom, Enron, Lehman Brothers, the big bubble bust, the subprime crisis of 2007-2008, and back home in India, Satyam Computers, Rico India, ICICI Bank, Kingfishers, United Spirits Limited. These are examples where, in spite of all efforts of the professional managers and the owners of the company to be in sync with one another, things did not work out right. Therefore, all these events and corporate scandals around the world are now raising awareness amongst managers, investors, and regulators. And there is an all out effort in many countries to ensure that corporate actions are directed towards safeguarding and progressively improving the value for the stakeholders and safeguarding the interest of all stakeholders. Internationally, also, there has been a great deal of debate regarding the imperative need for corporate governance for quite some time. In fact, it was way back in 1992 that the famous Cadbury Committee published its report, Financial Aspects of Corporate Governance, and defined corporate governance as the system by which the companies are directed and controlled. One single line definition, one single line concept. Corporate governance is all about the system by which the companies are directed and controlled. How does a specific particular corporate enterprise regulate its activities, direct its functions, and control its various actions? That's the entire architecture of the corporate governance. OECD, that is Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, in 1999 published its Principles of Corporate Governance, which also provides a very comprehensive definition of corporate governance. According to OECD, corporate governance is a set of relationships between a company's management, its board of directors, its shareholders, and other stakeholders. Corporate governance provides the structure through which the objectives of the company are set and the means of attaining those objectives and monitoring of performance are determined. So the first line amply makes it clear that corporate governance is all about relationships. Relationship between the company's professional management, its board of directors, providers of finance, shareholders, and other stakeholders with employees, vendors, suppliers, society, government, environment. And the corporate governance mechanism provides a basic structure through which the company lays down its core vision, mission, and objectives, and also provides direction and means of attaining those objectives. Of course, continuously monitoring performance with a view to ensuring that plans are duly met, and in case there is a variance, that is duly corrected and taken care of before it creates much of a havoc for the enterprise. Good corporate governance provides incentive for the board and management to pursue objectives of the corporate enterprise that are in the interest of the company, its shareholders, and its stakeholders, and it should facilitate effective monitoring, thus encouraging companies to use resources more efficiently. There is utmost importance given to efficient utilization of resources in any corporate enterprise across the world. And a company which has laid down well-structured governance architecture and a well-defined governance structure will be in a position to ensure optimum, rational, and effective utilization of its scarce resources, and that would ultimately lead to desirable outcomes and improved financial and operational results for the company, and that itself would be a great incentive for the board, for the management, and for the ultimate stakeholders to be able to continue to associate with the company and pursue its basic objectives. What is the significance of good corporate governance? Robust governance practices are imperative for companies to create positive perception, sentiment in the minds of investors and the public at large. Any investor, once he decides to put his money in a corporate enterprise, looks at its entire profile. What is the history of the company? What is the product profile? What kind of technology does the company deploy? What all geographies the company is operating on? But at the same time, the investor would also look at the corporate governance architecture that is there within the company and to what extent it is effective in promoting safeguarding of interest of all stakeholders and whether corporate governance mechanisms are adequately operating within that company or not. A company which has robust governance practices is looked at by investors and by public at large in a very, very positive way. Good corporate governance leads to producing and providing relevant, adequate, timely, and credible information to investors so that they can use such information for assessing the company's performance from time to time and take decision whether to stay invested, whether to invest more money into the enterprise, whether to pull out money from the company in case the performance is found to be not as per the expected outcome. There have been a lot of research studies carried out which have proved that the quality of corporate governance prevailing in a company has a very high positive correlation with the firm's profitability. Companies which have good corporate governance practices and mechanism are generally more profitable as compared to those companies which do not have a robust and a comprehensive corporate governance structure. Good corporate governance improves strategic thinking at the top management level by using the ideas, creativity, experience, and knowledge of independent directors on the board who bring a wealth of experience and a host of new ideas, which, if explored appropriately and implemented, can definitely provide desirable outcomes for the corporate enterprise. Good corporate governance architecture helps the management in identifying the various risks that the company is exposed to. And then it also provides a robust mechanism of monitoring and effectively managing those risks in the best interest of all stakeholders. Good corporate governance also safeguards the interests of the professional managers and the directors on the board by improving the overall decision-making process. The functioning of the company happens by way of various decisions taken by the board and the professional managers. It is not necessary that all the decisions must be right all the time. Some of the decisions at some times are bound to fail and bound to be providing a negative impact on the company. But if those decisions have been taken within the framework of good corporate governance, there can be no liability that can be fixed either on the board members or on the professional managers because in the market situation, in a highly competitive VUCA market world, some of the decisions of some of the companies are bound to fail that everyone recognizes as a fact of life. Let us look at some of the important principles of corporate governance. First important principle of corporate governance is accountability. Accountability refers to the obligation and responsibility of an executive or a professional manager to give an explanation or reason for his actions and conduct. Professional managers carry out their different tasks and functions through the authority delegated to them by the board. But then, when they are held accountable, what it essentially means is that they would have the responsibility to provide explanation and provide reason for some of their actions and conduct which may not produce the desired outcomes in a given situation. The board is also held responsible for determining the nature and extent of the risks that it is willing to take. The accountability is not only on the professional managers, but even the board of directors of the company are also accountable. They are accountable with regard to their assessment of the various kinds of risks that the company is exposed to and the actions taken by them with a view to monitoring, with a view to managing those risks in the best interest of all stakeholders. And for that, the board maintains a sound risk management system, including a robust and effective internal control system. Accountability also requires that the board of directors should establish very formal and transparent arrangement for corporate reporting for maintaining an appropriate relationship with the various stakeholders of the company. Because they are required to be held accountable for non-performance or performance falling short of the expectations of the stakeholders. Therefore, the board is also required to establish a formal and transparent arrangement of corporate reporting and risk management so that the stakeholders get to know what are the actions being taken by the directors, what is the outcome, and in case the outcome is less than desirable, then of course the directors would be held accountable for their actions. They will have to provide explanation and reasons for their actions and conduct. The board is required to communicate with stakeholders at regular intervals in a fair and balanced manner, providing to them a rational and a comprehensive assessment as to how the company is actually working towards achieving its basic purpose and objective. The second key principle of corporate governance is responsibility. The board of directors act on behalf of the company. They should therefore accept full responsibility for the power that is given to them and the authority that they exercise. Actually, authority and responsibility always go hand in hand. If a person has authority, then he must also have a corresponding responsibility to perform certain functions and carry out his conduct in a certain manner. Board of directors of the company are responsible for overseeing the management of the business affairs of the company, monitoring performance of the company. And in doing so, it is their responsibility to act in the best interest of the company and its various stakeholders. That is the responsibility cast on the board as a collective body of directors and also on each director who is a member of the board of directors of the company. Accountability goes hand in hand with responsibility. The board of directors should be made accountable to the stakeholders for the way in which they carry out their responsibilities while directing the affairs of a corporate enterprise. Third important principle of corporate governance is transparency. Transparency implies that the stakeholders who have engaged professional managers to manage the affairs of the company on a day-to-day basis should be kept duly informed on a regular basis transparently about the activities of the company, about its plans for the future, and also the risks which are involved and which are inherent in the business strategy. What is meant by transparency? Transparency means openness or a willingness on the part of the directors and the professional managers to provide clear information to shareholders and other stakeholders regarding organization's performance and its various activities. The information must be clear, reliable, credible, and factual. And this information should not only be financial, but should also reflect upon the impact, both positive and negative, of the company's operations on social and environmental segment of the society as well. Transparency principle also requires that the roles and responsibilities of each member of the board as well as each member of the professional management team of the company should be made public by way of probably hosting the information on the website of the company or sharing the information otherwise in some other way with the stakeholders. Transparency ensures that stakeholders gain confidence in the decision making and management processes of a company because they get regular information, credible information from time to time with regard to the functioning of the company, and that creates reliability, credibility, trust, loyalty, and confidence in the minds of the stakeholders that the company is being managed appropriately and efficiently. The next principle of corporate governance is about fairness. Fairness implies equal treatment. In addition to shareholders who are the providers of finance, the company must be very, very fair. Professional managers and board of directors must be very, very fair in their treatment of all stakeholders, including employees, suppliers, vendors, government, society, and responsibility of the company towards maintaining green planet. The board of directors shall give all stakeholders the opportunity to obtain effective redress for violation of their rights. If there is any incident where the fairness principle is violated or where a stakeholder feels that he has not been dealt with in a fair manner, there must be an appropriate mechanism or a structure available to the stakeholders to obtain effective redress for the violation of their rights. It is believed and proved by research that higher the degree of fairness exercised by the company, the more likely it is that the company will sustain on a long-term basis and would also be having loyal set of stakeholders because of the company's treatment of all stakeholders in a fair manner. Let's see what are some of the golden rules of good corporate governance practice. Ethics. A company and all its professional managers and directors is expected to function in an ethical manner, that is, basing its decisions and treating all the stakeholders of the company on the tenets and principles of moral and social value. You must align business goals with that of stakeholders' expectations. If there is a divergence between the goals of an enterprise, objectives of a company, and the expectations of the various stakeholders, things will not go the right way in such an organization. What is required is there has to be a complete alignment of the specific business goals of a corporate enterprise with that of the stakeholder expectation. And in order to ensure this, what is required is an appropriate structured mechanism of stakeholder participation in the decision making process so that the business goals are in synchronization with the expectations of the stakeholders. Strategic management. The strategies of the company and the process of setting strategy must, right from the beginning, incorporate the consideration of enhancing stakeholders' value. That is the key. That means if the company is to pursue the agenda of good corporate governance, then it must consider the objective of stakeholder value enhancement as the key tenet or the baseline element in its overall strategy formulation. The organization structure of the company should be such that it promotes and helps company to develop a good corporate governance system. A company may have a flat or a pyramid organization structure. It may have an open or a closed loop communication, but the essential feature and fact should be that organization structure of the company should facilitate imbibing of good corporate governance within the company. The reporting structure within the company for both internal and external communication must be based on the principles of transparency and accountability. These are 5 golden rules of good corporate governance practice. Generally, corporate governance refers to the practices by which the companies are controlled, directed, and governed. The fundamental premise of corporate governance is to ensure that the conditions whereby organizations, directors, and managers act in the interest of the organization and its stakeholders, and to ensure the means by which managers are held accountable and responsible to capital providers for efficient and effective use and protection of assets. So the fundamental basic concern of corporate governance mechanism is to ensure that the company is controlled, directed, and operated in the best interest of all the stakeholders. And on the other side, the professional managers and even the members of the board of directors of the company are held accountable to the stakeholders for their various actions and conduct. Let's look at what is the regulatory framework on corporate governance in India. To achieve the objectives of fair corporate governance, the government in India has put in place a fairly comprehensive statutory framework. The Indian statutory corporate governance framework has by and large been in consonance with the international best practices pertaining to corporate governance. Let's see what are the various guidelines, legislations by which the corporate governance practices of the company are regulated in India. First and foremost is the Companies Act 2013, which inter alia contains very comprehensive and detailed provisions relating to the constitution of the board of directors of a company, how the board meetings should be conducted at what periodicity, what board processes should be followed by the companies, the requirement of having a certain number and a certain proportion of independent directors on the board, how should general meetings of the company be convened and conducted, how should audit committee be constituted, and what should be the functions and responsibilities of audit committee, how to deal with related party transactions, and how to ensure appropriate relevant disclosures in the financial statements on the part of the company. All these aspects are discussed and deliberated, and there are due provisions enshrined in the Companies Act 2013. Then we have Securities and Exchange Board of India, SEBI guidelines. SEBI is a regulatory authority which has jurisdiction over all the listed companies. SEBI issues regulations, rules, and guidelines from time to time with regard to the functioning of the companies with a view to ensuring protection of investors. Standard listing agreement with stock exchanges. Anytime a company issues shares or comes out with an initial public offering or gets its shares listed on the stock exchange, the first and the basic requirement is to enter into a listing agreement with the particular stock exchange. There are various clauses in the standard listing agreement that the companies are required to enter into with the stock exchanges where they want their company's shares to be traded and listed, include very, very comprehensive provisions with regard to various aspects of corporate governance. Accounting standards issued by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. Institute of Chartered Accountants of India is an autonomous body which issues accounting standards from time to time, providing guidelines for accounting as well as disclosure of financial information by various corporate entities. Section 129 of the Companies Act 2013 provides that the financial statements prepared by the companies, which the income statement and the balance sheet and the cash flow statement shall give a true and fair view of the state of affairs of the company. And while preparing the financial statements, the company must also comply with the accounting standards notified under Section 133 of the Companies Act. So, there is requirement as per the Companies Act also that the financial statements compiled by the company should be in accordance with the accounting standards promulgated and released by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India from time to time. Then we have secretarial standards issued by the Institute of Company Secretaries of India. Institute of Company Secretaries of India is also an autonomous body which issues secretarial standards in terms of provisions of the Companies Act 2013. So far, the Institute has issued secretarial standards on meetings of the Board of Directors, that is Secretarial Standard 1, and Secretarial Standard on General Meetings, Secretarial Standard 2. Section 118, subsection 10 of the Companies Act 2013 provides that every company other than OPC, one-person company, shall observe on a mandatory basis secretarial standards specified as such by the Institute of Company Secretaries of India with regard to functioning, operation, and conduct of board meetings as well as general meetings. Under the Companies Act, a lot of emphasis is placed on corporate governance through regulating the board composition and board processes. Every company is required to appoint one resident director on its board. Various provisions have been initiated in the Companies Act 2013, which provide for induction of independent directors on the board of various companies. It is also clarified that nominee directors representing financial institutions or some other segment shall not be treated as independent directors. Certain specified classes of public companies are also required to appoint women directors on their board. Companies Act 2013 for the first time has also codified the duties of directors, which was missing in the earlier Companies Act of 1956. Companies Act mandates that the company must constitute the following committees. Of course, this clause is mandatory for a certain prescribed class of companies. The company must constitute an audit committee, a nomination and remuneration committee, a stakeholders relationship committee, and a CSR committee or corporate social responsibility committee. Let's see some of the provisions of listing agreement which relate to corporate governance. And the most important clause of listing agreement which deals with the provisions and aspects of corporate governance is clause 49, which is a very, very bold initiative towards strengthening of corporate governance architecture within the listed companies in India. With regard to composition of board of directors, the listing agreement clause 49 provides that in case where the chairman of the board is a non-executive director, at least 1/3 of the board members shall comprise of independent directors. And where the chairman of the board is an executive director, at least half of the board members shall comprise of independent directors. And it is further clarified, a relative of a promoter or an executive director shall not be considered as an independent director. Listing agreement clause 49 provides that every listed company must also constitute an audit committee which shall comprise of minimum 3 directors as members, out of which 2/3 are required to be independent directors. There is a further requirement that members of the audit committee must be financially literate. It is not necessary that they be CMAs or company secretaries or chartered accountants or MBA finance, but nonetheless, they should have the ability to be able to read, understand, interpret financial information. There is requirement of periodical disclosures relating to financial and commercial transactions and remuneration paid to directors of the company with a view to ensuring transparency. There are 2 types of disclosure requirements. One is periodical disclosure to be made at every board meeting, to be submitted along with quarterly financial results which are submitted to stock exchange or as part of the annual financial statements. And then there are certain event-based or trigger-based disclosure requirements which are required to be shared with the stakeholders as and when a particular event or a trigger happens. There is a provision for certification by Chief Financial Officer or Chief Executive Officer. They are required to certify the financial statements with regard to their fairness and with regard to their compliance with the various laws and regulations, including accounting standards, and also accept responsibility for robustness of the internal control system. Clause 49 also specifies management of risk as one of the key dimensions of corporate governance. Audit committee and the independent directors of the company are entrusted with the responsibility of evaluating the robustness of the risk management systems and evaluate and review from time to time the policy laid down by the board with regard to monitoring and management of risk. Clause 49 of the listing agreement also mandates every listed company to have a code of conduct, and the company is required to host the code of conduct on their website. The board members and all other senior management personnel are required to affirm compliance with the code on an annual basis, and a statement is required to be included in the annual report by way of a statement made by the chief executive officer of the company. With regard to various compliances, the company is required to obtain a certificate either from the auditors or a practicing company secretary that the company has duly complied with the various compliances required to be made and implemented by the company with regard to the conditions of corporate governance, and this certificate or compliance certificate is required to be attached with the director's report, which is compiled and published by the company every year. With regard to remuneration paid to senior management personnel of the company as well as directors, Clause 49 mandates constitution of a nomination and remuneration committee which shall consist of at least 3 directors, all of whom shall be non-executive directors, and at least half of the directors of NRC shall be independent. The basic function and objective of nomination and remuneration committee is to ensure that the level and composition of remuneration payable to directors is reasonable and just and fair. The relationship between remuneration and performance must be very clear. The remuneration to directors, key managerial personnel, and senior management must also be a balance between fixed and incentive pay, linking the same with short and long-term performance objectives appropriate to the working of the company and its various goals and objectives. I would like to share with you a few case studies of some of the landmark cases which have reflected failure of corporate governance architectures. Starting with the well-known case of Satyam Computer Services. This particular failure of corporate governance mechanism event happened in 2009, in which chairman of Satyam Limited, Ramalinga Raju, admitted that the company's accounts had been manipulated. Satyam scandal was to the tune and order of rupees 7,000 crores as a result of manipulation of accounts. Mr. Ramalinga Raju sent an email to SEBI wherein he confessed to falsifying the cash and bank balances of the company. Weeks before the scam began to unravel, with his statement that he was riding a tiger and did not know how to get down without being killed. Raju said in an interview that the company had a cash balance of 4,000 crores and could leverage it to further raise another 15 to 20,000 crores as debt from the market, but which was a false statement This was reflected by way of manipulation of accounts, which was far away from the reality. The company, really speaking, did not have this level of cash balance. Mr. Ramalinga Raju was convicted with 10 other members sentenced to jail by Serious Fraud Investigation Office SFIO. Even auditors of Satyam PricewaterhouseCoopers had a hard time dealing with this particular case. The second case study is that of Rico India Limited. The saga at Rico India Limited demonstrates that the good governance that is automatically ascribed to MNCs does not really ensure positive results. Normally we believe that probably Indian companies are yet not so far advanced and progressive with regard to adoption of good governance practices, but MNCs are better off. But here is a case of an MNC operating within India which did not really demonstrate elements and dimensions of good corporate governance. The Rico India case was almost a replica of the Satyam episode in terms of accounting fraud and the resultant fraud at the stock market by way of manipulation of stock prices. Just a few corrupt managers in Rico India Limited obliterated the system with the usual failure of the main regulating institution such as auditors, credit rating agencies, independent directors of repute, including the powerful audit committee manned by independent directors. In spite of company having all this architecture in place, some of handful of the professional managers of the company could play around with the stocks of the company and created havoc and chaos in the company, and this was ascribed to poor corporate governance practices within the company. ICICI Bank scam case. Mrs. Chanda Kochar, as we all know, has been relieved of her duties as the Chief Executive Officer. It was the role of the board in hurriedly giving a clean sheet to its Chief Executive Officer without the results of an independent investigation being released in the public domain, which smacks of alleged nepotism, and its refusal to take any questions on the matter later. Kingfisher Airlines and United Spirits case. It was entirely evident that assets had been transferred from United Spirits Limited to subsidize Kingfisher, that United Breweries holding was utilized as a channel or a conduit for raising loans and giving them to other group companies. Intercorporate loans were given to group companies without the board's approval. Accounts were manipulated, reviews were stage overseen, and this all happened during the period when Mr. Vijay Mallya was responsible for overseeing and overlooking the functioning of United Spirits case. So these are some of the key and leading case studies of failures of corporate governance in India, in spite of the fact that there are provisions contained in the Companies Act, in the SEBI guidelines, in the listing agreement with the stock exchanges. In spite of all this, these scams and these scandals did happen in India not long back, within just about a decade of last 10 years. That shows that corporate governance is not a tick box exercise. Only law cannot prevent bad governance. Good corporate governance can be brought about within the companies only by way of a change of mindset on the part of the directors as well as professional managers, where they consider good governance as part of the DNA of organization and thus carry out their duties in such a manner so as to subserve the interest of all the stakeholders. In its 2018 report on corporate governance, In key Asian jurisdictions, the Asian Corporate Governance Association gave a score of 54% to the Indian corporate governance regime, ranking it seventh amongst 12 Asian countries. Similarly, Saha Ratings in 2018 World Corporate Governance Index of 150 countries placed India in Group 2, comprising of countries eligible to enter Group 1 but requiring further steps to be taken in the field of improving corporate governance policies and practices. Corporate governance is beyond the realm of law. It stems from the culture and mindset of management, cannot be regulated by legislation alone. You may have any number of laws and legislations, but nonetheless, there are bound to be certain failures in some of the companies because law itself will not be enough to prevent these kind of scandals. Ultimately, corporate governance goes beyond the realm of law. Corporate governance is all about ethical conduct of business, and ethics is concerned with the code of values and principles that enable a person to distinguish, identify, and choose between what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong. So, the real onus of achieving desired level of corporate governance lies in the proactive initiatives taken by the companies themselves and not in external regulatory measures that will not help. Ultimately, companies have to become proactive. They have to imbibe the spirit and culture of corporate governance with a view to bringing about the desired level of corporate governance in India. The extent of discipline, transparency, and fairness, and the willingness shown by the companies themselves in implementing the code will be the crucial factor in achieving the desired confidence of shareholders and other stakeholders and fulfilling the goals of the company. So to end, message for Indian companies is loud and clear. The companies have to adopt good corporate governance practices if they have to survive, prosper, and grow. The message is very clear: shape up or ship out. There's no second thought on this. Shape up or ship out. Thank you.